Welcome to The Visionary Entrepreneur. My name is Dane Dunlap.
And I'm Nicholas Genovese.
This is a podcast where we interview entrepreneurs about their story and visions for the future. We're here to create a space to network and to learn from each other's experiences. Hey guys, welcome back to The Visionary Entrepreneur. Today we have Jeff Himmel with us. Jeff is an expert in the branding and advertising space. He is the CEO and founder of the Himmel Group for the last 37 years. His company has revitalized and built hundreds of brands, and some of the most notorious would be Ovaltine or Gold Bond Powder. And for those of you that don't know Ovaltine, it is a milk-flavored powder similar to Nesquik, and actually he was able to revitalize that brand to the point where they were actually sold to Nestle. So definitely an expert in the field, and we're going to talk to him about branding today. So thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
So like we said, wanted to talk to you a bit about branding and specifically how to advertise and how to build a brand as an entrepreneur. So obviously you've had a ton of experience looking at successful brands and building them yourself. And so my question to you is, what are some of the attributes that you have seen of the most successful brands? When you look at a brand, what really sticks out? Okay, that's a successful brand.
To me, what stands out is the ability to connect with the consumer. And it gets down to engagement. It's a very common buzzword these days, which is the key is to engage. The problem is not a lot of companies know how to engage. So it's all about, marketing is all about grabbing attention. So to grab attention, you need to have a messaging that resonates with your target audience. You need to have a product or service that addresses a pain point of a target consumer where you resolve that pain point. There has to be a strong value proposition, and you have to communicate it in a way that stands out. So your messaging is heard and people hear it, they see it, and they gravitate to it. So that's the answer on a very simplistic level. It gets difficult when you break down all the disciplines of marketing. So for example, the role of packaging, package design. If the product is one that sits on a product shelf at retail, if a consumer walks down a CVS aisle, that consumer, you have literally 5 to 7 seconds as that consumer walks down the aisle for that packaging to scream out at you, grab me, because it's a very crowded shelf. The same thing goes through with messaging. If you look at messaging in digital or on television, there's a lot of noise. And being able to stand out, whether it's from the point of view of content, whether it's from the point of view of video messaging online or on traditional media like television or radio, after you have the first few seconds to grab attention, a lot of the digital advertising doesn't really engage for more than a millisecond. So you need to have a strategy where very early on you can grab attention, even grab attention amidst all the noise of competition.
What I think I was going to ask you is, you mentioned grabbing attention. How much harder is that to do in today's day and age with the fact that digital is flooding? You got Instagram ads, you got Twitter, you have all this stuff, and companies are flooding it constantly. I think it's a lot easier to frequently get your message out. So how much harder is it nowadays to get the audience's attention?
So, I mean, it's obviously much harder. But again, the starting point is, do you address a pain point that's otherwise going unmet? Do you have a strong value proposition? Do you have messaging that will resonate with your target audience? That's the bare minimum you have to have. if you don't even have that, then you don't even get to answer the question you're raising.
Right.
So, you know, if you have a product that's meaningful to a consumer, addressing a need that's otherwise going unmet, then you have a chance to stand out. It doesn't even mean you will stand out. But if all you are is at best parity, then it's an uphill battle all the way. That's why when we develop brands or when we acquire brands, we need to have a point of difference where that point of difference is meaningful to the consumer. And we also look for categories that are quiet, that are underdeveloped, that don't have a lot of noise. Because the more noise, the more competition, the more advertising and marketing dollars that are going into a particular category to target the same consumer I'm going after, it's harder to compete. On the other hand, if I can find a category where I'm the only one in the category, then I have a very good chance of being successful. When I acquired Ovaltine, Nestle, Nesquik was a very small brand. I mean, Nestle is a Swiss company with multi-billion dollars in sales. And Nesquik, while it was the market leader in the United States, was very small and basically under their radar. So I had no problem taking on Nestle. And in my first year and every year that I owned Ovaltine, I outspent Nestle, Carnation, Hershey's, the entire category. I outspent all of them in advertising and marketing dollars every single year so that I was top of mind and had a higher level of awareness by virtue of my spend in advertising and marketing to stand out.
That brings us to like a really important point, which is outspending versus outthinking. So you, as you mentioned, you have outspent everyone in your category. What if you're just starting out? You don't have this massive budget. Would you suggest to acquire that massive budget, or how far can you get just without thinking the competition?
In the beginning, when you start out with a small brand, whether we have in the past acquired small dying brands where we felt that they were diamonds in the rough and we could see the future, or you're building a brand from scratch, you have a vision on what you can do with the brand. You've got to stand out. I mean, you have to figure out how you're going to do it. I've owned my own media buying company for 35 years, so I have a lot of know-how in buying media efficiently and effectively. Super important. It's been super important for me in the past. It will continue to be important going forward. Again, you have to grab attention. And if you don't have the financial resources, you got to find a hook. Now, hooks can be acquired. I don't mean in the financial sense. You can get super lucky, like the cult following that existed several years ago around the ALS disease with the ice bucket challenge. There was a situation where literally out of nowhere, not for a significant dollar amount of money, it wasn't. They basically increased the foundation's support around ALS to the tune of $200 million in a year. So that occurred. There was a hook. And that's what I'm talking about, grabbing attention. Grabbing attention can happen in any one of a number of ways. There's a case in point with the Ice Bucket Challenge where it didn't happen with money. It was an idea. It was an idea that just caught on like wildfire. So I don't think that you can build a business assuming that you'll get lucky enough to create a cult following the way the Ice Bucket Challenge did. You have to be prepared to outspend the competition or have some creative genius or hook that can do it for you. It's a challenge.
So you talked about trying to make your content worth it for the audience and creating a hook. And
Yep.
for someone like Nick and I, we're ourselves trying to build a brand and we're just starting out and we might not have the financial resources. Really, how much frequency do you think you should be out there as for a starting brand? Because I know that one of the things you
Great,
focused
great
on
question.
is frequency.
Great question. Um, there has always been this friction between frequency and reach advertising in the form of media planning. I'll give you a perfect example, and that's if you were to buy a Super Bowl ad today, the cost of one Super Bowl ad is about $5 million. Add on to that the cost of the production for a Super Bowl ad, very high quality production, $1.5 million. So you're up to $6.5 million. Add on the cost of talent. They use famous people. Add on another $2 million. So you're up to $8.5 million for one 30-second spot. Now assume that you run that same spot twice in the Super Bowl. So you're now up to $13.5 million for one evening. And you've blown your media budget for the rest of the year. Put aside the fact that at best you're reaching, I don't know what the audience delivery is of the Super Bowl, but let's say it's 100 million people. So you spend 13.5 million to get 100 million people. Rather than hitting 100 million people once, I would hit my target audience with 20 billion impressions, 365 days a year, with over 150,000 spots on television and radio. To me, frequency of advertising is the holy grail. Why? It's repetition of messaging that creates awareness. If you think about it, when you were children, when my kids were children, we wanted to teach them arithmetic. So what would we do? We'd pull out the flashcards. And with the flashcards, we wouldn't just do them with our kids one day and say, you're done, you've learned it. We'd do the flashcards day after day after day, because repetition is what creates learning, and it creates top of mind awareness. It's no different than in advertising. There is a direct correlation between the amount that you invest in advertising and the awareness that you create and the loyalty that you build and the market share that you create and your ability to resist price competition and your leverage with retailers, and on and on and on and on. Staying top of mind all of the time, because out of mind, you're out of business. So frequency is critical.
And you would also say diversifying across as many platforms as you can, or would you suggest focusing on a certain few that you're strong
It's a
at?
super good question. Starting out with a small brand, you sit back and you say, okay, well, this year I have $2 million to spend. So if I have $2 million to spend, and I know that frequency is important, so I want to be on air 52 weeks a year, so that on any given, to your words, channel, you have an effective spend. You don't want the spend to be so small by spreading it out over so many channels that you're not getting a good repetition of messages against a specific audience. So it may turn out that if there are an available, let's say, 3 channels that you can utilize, that your choices are with $9 to put $3 on each channel. That's the type of planning that has to take place.
Thank you. That was awesome. So we talked to one of our other guests, and he was really big on the entrepreneur or the salesman trying to sell features of the product because they're usually so obsessed with their products. Like, for example, the drill. People are trying to describe the drill features. Oh, this drill has this and this drill has that. buy my drill, but in reality the customer just wants to buy the holes that the drill makes. So what is your idea on that, on messaging to the customer to actually get your
So
product sold?
one of the things that we do before we message is there's an expression in the advertising business. If you want to know how to sell a consumer, ask them.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to, drilling, you need to understand from that consumer what's most important to you. What are your pain points? When you use a drill, is it the bit that's the problem? Is it the drill itself? Is it something in the wall? Is the wall not stable? Tell me about the issues and challenges you have. You message if you don't know what's important to them. So as I said, you do have to understand your consumer and what their needs are in order to meet them.
Perfect.
Yeah. Another question that I had, it kind of has to do with more today's day and age. And you touched on this in the beginning. You talked about if you don't have good content that's going to help someone, you're dead in the water. It doesn't even matter if you get your audience's attention or not. And I think one of the things I wanted to ask you about is how important authenticity is in today's day and age, and really engaging in an authentic way. Because I think with social media, it's really easy to not be authentic and just put in millions and millions of ads that just, you're not really connecting with people. So how important is that?
So interesting that you're saying that. Authenticity is so central today. We're in the middle of developing a line of acne remedies right now. And before and after images of what my skin looked like before and what it looks like now, or how I was, 250 pounds before, and 4 weeks later, I'm, 160 pounds. Authenticity, central today. Super, super important. And the level of authenticity and need for transparency, whether it's of ingredients, messaging, believability, how you communicate that, the use of beautiful people, your commercials. So this is so important, the issue you're raising, that it's something that the brand identity firm that is helping us right now with this line of skincare products in developing the brand identity, the image, the package design, being able to communicate authenticity is right at the top of our priority. Super important for consumers today.
Yeah, and I think especially with automation, and you have all these automated messages that these companies are sending you, there's not much personal touch when it comes to branding and advertising, I feel, anymore. So I think that plays exactly into what you're describing. When you get a customer seat, it's always that automated message. There's never a personal message to a consumer anymore. So I think if you could still do that in today's day and age, you can kill it with advertising.
And it's not just brands. Even in the case of the not-for-profit world, there are organizations that will do email blasts, and you open the email and the first thing they do is ask for money.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you can't connect, it's all about emotional connection. If you can't emotionally connect with your audience, then, asking for money up front is just not the way to do it. It's the same thing with a brand. And in fact, whether it's a not-for-profit charity or an individual looking to establish a profession, at the end of the day, you have to, speak with authenticity. You have to story about how you can help those you want to serve. And that requires engagement, understanding the needs of the person you're talking to. That's super. You can't succeed without it.
So, our last question to wrap it up, we ask this all our guests, is your visions of the future, and in specific of marketing. But my view on the current, what is currently going on with coronavirus, with Black Lives Matter, with this whole political thing that's going on the internet, everybody is emotional and everybody is triggered by all these posts that coming out on social media, and the emotions are extremely high. How do you move forward? How can you come up with a branding that's great and positive without necessarily coming out with some outrageous marketing?
I think that the rules of the game don't change. At the end of the day, authenticity, credibility, believability, understanding the needs of your consumer. Maybe the channels change. The advent of technology is a major plus, because through technology, you're able to, through social media, you're able to listen and hear very closely what your consumers are saying. It's a wonderful thing. So it's all about staying close to the consumer, understanding their needs, having a product or service with a strong value proposition that meets their needs in a way that no one else can do. And needs will evolve, but you have to stay on top of it, understand it, address it, work with the latest technology, which in this case for us is a major plus. And, the future looks bright if you're fortunate enough to find that unique product offering with a high value proposition that addresses a need that's gone unmet. Boy, it's rare to happen, because without it, you only end up competing on price because you're a parity product. With it, you have a bright future.
Well, that was an awesome podcast. So many cool answers from you, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you for taking the time.